explain how to make that work. So we have this situation now where I can shoot these stationary asteroids. Cool. I'm going to change my screen black to be black again instead of white. It's hard to see. Okay, so I want to spawn 5 of these asteroids randomly around the screen. So I can just write a loop here that spawns 5 asteroids, and I can just use some random number generation to control where they go. And if you remember random number generation, you can probably just copy this from any of our dice examples. It's just a roll of a dice. And so instead of just always spawning it here, I'm going to spawn it at 100 plus some rand value modulo 1000. And then it's going to be 50 plus modulo this plus 600. And I'm going to do this 5 times so I get 5 asteroids. And they're all going to be kind of randomly strewn around the screen. Like so. And it should be easy enough just to verify. I'm going to have 100 of these. That are all kind of spawning everywhere. Cool. And I can blow all of them up. Okay. So that was the first part of the lab. Stationary asteroids, I want half of them to be small and half of them to be large. So again, I'm going to just change the texture here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be an if statement. Modulo 2 is equal to 0, then it's going to do this. Otherwise, it's going to do this. And actually, all I'm going to change here is going to be the texture. So modulo 2 equals 0, that means it's a coin flip. Half the time it's going to be one, half the time it's going to be other. And then we're going to pass it in here.
I think it's the texture.
So I have 5 asteroids now, and kind of half of them are big, half of them are small. 50% chance. But I can still shoot these guys. And the collision radius on these asteroids are huge. But let's worry about that in just a second. I want these guys to randomly move around as well. So number 4 is I want them to move in random directions. So the first thing I kind of want to do is just have them move in one direction. So I'm just going to set the velocity here to be 100 and just make them all move in the same direction. If I want them to move in different directions, though, that's based on their angle. So if I just change their angle to be a random number, like so, before I set the velocity, now they're going to rotate and then move in the direction that they're rotating. So now they're all moving in random directions. Cool. I can even change it so their speed is not all consistent. Like maybe some of them are going to move slightly faster and some of them are going to move slightly slower. Adding a little bit of variance is okay. But they're all kind of moving in different directions based on the angle. All right? So the final piece I want to do is, before I get to number 5, actually we can do the rotation one too. So when I want this thing to rotate every frame, remember we did that for the bullet, to have the bullets rotate every frame. So if I create my own update function for the asteroid and write it here, I can set the angle to be equal to the current angle plus delta time times some rate of rotation, maybe 45 is a good rate of angles. The problem is, if I just do this, all of a sudden my asteroids aren't going to move anymore. Because all the logic for moving, see how they're in the upper left corner here? That all exists inside the base game object update function. The problem is I'm not calling the base object update function. It doesn't happen automatically. I have to explicitly call that. And I explicitly call it by typing GameObject : update, and I pass it the same arguments I got. And this says, hey, do whatever your GameObject normally does. However, on top of that, I'm going to also set the angle to be a different value every frame. So now my little asteroids will rotate every frame. Now, for our game, I want it so that if I shoot a large asteroid, I'm going to create 3 small asteroids. So that means that I want to change the behavior so that I want to create some asteroids every time it gets destroyed. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in a way that makes it use object-oriented programming, because we're going to have another type of asteroid in between those two sizes. And for now, if you look, we're actually specifying the texture of the asteroid here and here. But what if I could just make a large asteroid and a small asteroid, right? Or small asteroid in this case, and a large asteroid. If I had these two objects, I wouldn't need to pass in a texture. I could just pass in a position like this. And by making a large and small asteroid, I can actually just have this guy have different behavior than the small one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two new classes. A large asteroid class that's deriving off asteroid, and I'm going to make a small asteroid class deriving off asteroid. Okay? These two now are going to be slightly different in their behavior. The small asteroid is going to have a smaller collision radius, and the large asteroid is going to spawn smaller asteroids when it gets destroyed. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a constructor for the large asteroid, but I'm only going to give it one argument. In fact, I'm only going to give it this position argument that I got from above. And same thing for the small asteroid. I'm going to make a constructor for it that is just one argument. So let me implement these two constructors here. I'm going to implement the large asteroid constructor like so. And I'm going to also have the same constructor for a small asteroid. And I need these two constructors because the textures they're going to use are going to be different. Now, how do I specify a texture for these asteroids? Well, these large and small asteroids are derived classes from the asteroid class, which means it takes a texture. The base class takes a texture for the constructor. Remember how I call the base constructor? I do colon the base class name, and then I pass in all my arguments. My first argument here that I'm going to pass in is going to be the path to my large texture. This guy here that I deleted. I'm going to put him in the call to the parent class constructor. So here I'm in my large asteroid. I'm going to call my parent constructor. I'm going to pass in this texture, and I'm just going to pass in the position here. Same exact thing for the small asteroid, like so. Instead of big one, it's going to be small one. And as an added bonus, I'm going to set my collision radius equal to 20 here for the small asteroid. It's going to be a little bit smaller for collision detection rate. Okay, so now I have my function that creates small and large ones, but my small ones are still going to look the same. However, their collision radius is going to be a lot more reasonable. As opposed to hitting from 50 pixels away, I can only hit from 20 pixels away, like that. That's a little bit more realistic for what our purposes are. Now, the real reason, though, is I want these large asteroids, when I blow them up, I want them to spawn smaller asteroids. Okay? So I have a function here. When a game object gets destroyed, it calls the destroy function here. If I make this guy virtual, now I can overwrite him in my child classes, and I can change his behavior in the case of a large asteroid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this function for the large asteroid, like so. And the first thing I'm going to do is going to call my base class destroy call, because I want to make sure I still destroy this thing. But now I want to spawn 3 small asteroids. What I can do is I can make a small asteroid like so, and I can just pass in my position for this guy. And I can set the angle to be some random angle if I wanted to. I'm just going to leave this as is for now. I just want to see an asteroid created. Now, I need to add this thing to the game objects array. Conveniently, I actually store off a pointer to the game that has the array under this mOwner member variable. So right after I create it, if I grab the mOwner and I say add object, I can add my small asteroid right here. Okay? So with just this, I'm making 3 small asteroids when I blow up a large one. They're not going to move or anything like that, but they'll be there rotating. There's actually 3 right there, so if I shoot it 1, 2, 3, there's actually 3 on top of one another. So if I wanted to, I can now rotate them. So I can set the angle to be some random angle, and then I can set the velocity to be something like 50. By doing those things, I'm creating these small asteroids right on top of the large asteroid's position. That's what I'm doing right here. And then I'm rotating them slightly, and I'm moving them a little bit. So there's my one large asteroid. I'm going to shoot this guy. There's 3 that come out of it. And now what I can do is I can get rid of this small asteroid spawning. I just want all of my asteroids to be big. And now I have the classic game. Except my guy doesn't blow up when he gets hit by an asteroid.
God mode.
It is God mode. That could be a cheat. We can talk about implementing cheats too. Sometimes you need cheats for your game, right? Like sometimes you want to have the ability to say, hey, make my gun shoot a lot faster, right? Which you can do. You can have something like say, hey, I'm going to have a bullet here. And I'm a player. And I'm going to say, if my keyboard is pressed, what we actually do on Overwatch is actually, we have key combinations that enable cheat mode. So it's like they're only enabled internally, but what we'll do is we'll turn on cheats to say like, hey, cheats are enabled. And let me just show you guys real quick how we would do something like that. I'm going to have a bool inside our game that says cheats enabled, like so. And this is going to be false by default. By default, no cheats are enabled. However, inside the update, what I can do is, if SF keyboard is key pressed, let's make the cheat key, I don't know, we're just going to make it, the shift key, left shift. And that way, what we can do is have a bool that returns whether cheats are enabled, like so. And then, inside of our game, when we're firing, we can change this case here. So say, hey, if mOwner cheats enabled, I can change the cooldown of my left control to be 0. So this means that I can press left control by default. So I'm shooting normally. If I hold down shift though, press control, I get my cheat mode. Insta reported. So I'm holding down control, press shift, and all of a sudden I get my cheats, right? Sometimes some of that stuff can be useful for development purposes. And the reason why this is useful is that you can actually make it so that when you release your game, this behavior is actually removed in that case. So there's actually a way you can only enable this behavior in debug builds, for instance. So that way, this statement right here only exists inside of a debug build. So if I build a release build, for instance, which I'm not sure actually this is, so if I run a release build, which is typically what you do for performance sake, so I'm holding down shift and nothing's happening, right? If I switch to debug, now I have my cheats. I didn't change any code. I literally just changed this from debug to release. And when I run this now, it gives me the option of giving a game to people that don't have cheats enabled, but while I'm debugging it, I get these cheats, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all these files to Zool, and I'm going to go over the homework with you guys because there's a few details to it. I'm going to just take this entire engine folder. I'm going to delete the one that's on Zool right now. I lost access to this thing because I deleted it. Damn. Make a new one. Let me put that up here. Let me also copy the homework up there. So there's a folder called homework, which you guys can grab and take home if you didn't get to finish the lab, which has everything in it. So the homework I want you guys to do is, right now you guys have asteroids that rotate, but I want to add a little bit more specific rotation. I want these to rotate between 45 to 90 degrees per second clockwise, or half the time I want them to rotate 45 to negative 90 degrees counterclockwise. That means half of them should be rotating clockwise and half of them should be rotating counterclockwise, okay? Then I want you guys to add the concept of a medium-sized asteroid. It's a lot like what we just did for the large one, but I want you to add a medium one. So when you destroy a large one, I want you to create 3 medium ones. And when you destroy a medium one, I want you to create 2 small ones, okay? And then this one here is when the asteroid hits the player, I want you to blow up the player. Basically destroy the player. The tricky part is I also want you to print "you lose" to the screen that looks like this. You can also have it say "game over" if you want. But not only do I want you to destroy the player ship, I want you to draw this. It seems simple, but it's not. Because I don't want you to draw this normally. I only want you to draw this when the player has been destroyed. Okay? All right, any questions on the homework? Questions on any of these pieces? Okay. All right, so you guys can spend time in class.